Hey there, today we will learn how to create a form in Flutter application. We will also learn how to validate forms data, how to use forms data when everything is okay. So here is the demo. You will see there is 5 fields. So first name, last name, email, password and confirm password. If I now click sign up, you will see there is a validation error is showing. So suppose I want to fill the data. So I want to give my first name, last name, and suppose a testing email, and suppose the password, again the confirm password, and finally if I click sign up, you see it navigate to a new page where it is showing successful, and I can see the forms data. And in this tutorial you will also learn how to customize the form fields. Like these fields are not default styled, I just did some customization so that it looks like this. So anyway, let's start coding. So here I have created a blank project in my Android Studio, and I want to remove all the code except the import file. So and I just remove this my app thing. Okay, and now what I want to do, I want to install a third-party library. So in this application we need to check that whether an email is valid or not, and there is a third-party library named validators in the pub.dev. If you use this library, using that you can use this email checking. There is not only email checking but also other important essential functions are used in this library. So here if you see the documentation, you will see there are many essential functions are defined. So anyway, let's install this thing. So I copy these validators and the version number, and I went to my Android Studio. I open my pubspec.yml and I paste that code after Cupertino icons and save this thing, and now I click package get. So it will be installed in this project. So now come to the main.dart file, and here I want to import that third-party library as well. That library name is validator, so I will type import as validators or validator. Okay, now here I want to create a stateless widget, and let's create a material app. So instead of return this container, let's return this material app. And give a body for this widget body, and we will use test from widget, which yet not defined. We will define that widget at the bottom. So basically this test from widget will be a stateful widget. So here I will give the name test from. Okay, now to define a form, we first have to define a global key. So to define a global key, I have to type final, and I give the name form key, and then I have to use the class name global key, and I want to the global key basically holds a state. So I want to define that what type of state it can hold. So within angle bracket I will use from state. Global key basically a unique key which differentiate the widget to all other widget in an application. Okay, so using this key you can differentiate and access the widget where you use this key as a key. So when we define a form, we have to pass a key, and according to the documentation, official documentation, it says use a global key for the form, so that you can use the form key or global key to access that form. So this is the main reason why we need to define a global key. Okay, and now let's define a form inside this build method. So before defining a form, I just want to use a half media width calculation for styling the form field. So here I am defining a half media width. So basically, if your application runs in different device, you can access that device width by using this media query object. Okay, So what I want to know the half size of the width, because we need this information to design our form. So to design a form in Flutter application, you have to use the form widget. So here is the form widget, and when you define a form widget, you have to pass a key. So here we are going to use this form key, which is a global key. Okay, so we pass this form key, and now let's define the child. And then I will use a child, and here I may use text form field. So if I run this program, I can see the output in the iPhone XS simulator. So currently you are seeing a form field, a text field. So here I can type text, but we do not want to use text field like this, so we want to further customize it. So basically we are going to use first name, last name, email and password. Instead of using this text form field directly within our form widget, I want to create a separate class so that I can easily pass some parameter and customize the form field. So let's define the class. So let's define some parameters or properties for this custom class. So basically I defined 5 properties in this class. One is the hint text, which is a string, and then 2 function, validator and onSaved, which I can pass from externally when creating an instance of this class, and there are other 2 parameters, is password and is email. So these properties we need to customize the text field. So let's define a default constructor, and I want to give default value for is password and is email to false. Now let's override this build method. So basically I defined a text from field widget in here as a child, and where I am using the decoration, input decoration widget, to define some more property to style this text from field. And here hint text basically is a property of input decoration. So when we pass an hint text, so if currently you see the text, if I remove this text, clear this text, you will see that there is nothing is shown here, but when you pass a hint text, it will show a text field, so that we can understand, or user can understand, that what need to input. And these other fields are basically to style this text field. Text field has some more parameters as well. For example, if you want to use a text field as a password, so you can use that obscure text property. So here we will use this is password property. If it is true, then we will use true, otherwise it will be false. And when we need validation, that if the user gives the correct data or not, we need to use a function. Which function we will be using is a validator function, which will be passed externally. So we will use that validator function here, and when everything is okay, we will use the onSaved function to save that data. And finally there is a keyword type important parameter. So if there is an email, then we want to change the input. So we will change the keyboard by using the text input, type this object email address, otherwise we will use normal text keyboard. Okay, so our custom my text form field is done. I will discuss further when I will use this inside this form field. So now what I want to do, instead of using this text form field directly in the form, I want to remove this thing, and I want to use the custom object I created, that I want to use that as a widget in here. If I save this thing, you will see now this text field looks different. Okay, so here in the design, in the decoration, you see there is a hint text, content padding, border. So if I remove this border thing, let's see what it's shown. You will see a border in under this text field, right? But I do not want to use that border. That's why I give that border input border dot none. Also, if I do not provide this field, or I use field equals false, you will see the form field does not have any field color. But if you just use it true and pass a color as a field color, you will see the field color in here. And the content padding is basically used to the text, so that the text looks nice inside the text field. That is the content padding. Okay, now here if I want to pass a hint text, when I created this my text form field widget, I did not pass any properties. Right now let's pass a hint text, first name, and save this thing. You see now it is showing first name, but when I type something, that first name hint text is gone. So at this moment I do not want to pass other properties like validator onset. I will do that later. So let's create another field. So I copy this container thing and paste it here, and I use the hint text last name, so that I can see that last name is showing at the bottom. But I do not want to use last name at the bottom. I want to use first name and last name at the same row. So to do that, I just have to use the row widget. And now if I give this row, it shows in the same row. But I also use a alignment. So in the row, I want to use the cross axis alignment for the column. Basically, that cross axis alignment is start, so that it looks at the top. Okay, so our first two fields, first name and last name, is done. So let's create some other fields like email and password field. So to do that, I just copy this my text field thing. I do not need that container. I can use that my text field directly inside this column. So here it is. So my text field from, and here I want to use email. Okay, so I want to pass email. And if I save this thing, you will see there is an email. But here in our text field, which we define the my text form field class, you see that when we want to use this text field as an email, we should pass an is email property to true, because when you pass this email property to true, and here when I type, I basically type in the keyboard, but I want to activate the software keyboard. So to do that, in iOS simulator, I have to use this toggle software keyboard. So here you see this normal keyboard is showing, right? But if I pass this hint text and then is email to true and save this thing, and let's change this thing, and you see that when I move my cursor to email, here their bottom is a @ is added. So this is the benefit, and this feature basically looks different in iOS and Android as well. Now let's create two more field. One is for password. So here I want to use password, hint text password, and in this case it will be is password true. And if I save this thing, you will see there is a password field. But normally when you are creating a sign up form, it's better to use two password field. One is password and another one is the confirm password. So copy this thing and paste it here and write confirm password, so that user has no chance to mistype their password. And finally, what I want to do, I want to use a sign up button. I want to create a sign up button, and in that case we do not need to use this my text form field. We want to use a raised button widget in this case. And if I save this thing, you will see there is a sign up button, but it looks disabled because I did not give any on pressed property. Okay, so if I want to do that, what I have to type, I have to type after this child on pressed, and in this case I do nothing. I just use a print statement, print sign up. I save this thing and now you will see that the button looks blue. That means this button has an on pressed event. If I click this sign up, you will see in the terminal there is a sign up label is showing. So basically our form fields and a button design is done. When I want to click this sign up thing, I first want to validate all the data, and if there is an error, I want to show user the errors, and if everything is okay, I want to redirect user to a new page with the data. Basically in real application we want to use that data to save in server using API or saved in offline, but in our demo I just want to redirect user to another screen where I want to show that data. Okay, so to do that, let's create another screen, and before that, as I want to pass all of this from data to another screen, for that I want to create a model to easily transfer data from screen to screen. So to do that, let's create a Dart file here, and I want to give the name model.dart, and here let's define a model. So our model is done. We are basically creating a simple class where we can pass first name, last name, email and password, and all are these named properties, and by default these are optional. So anyway, when I will pass the forms value to another skin, I will use an instance of that object. So let's create the another skin, so another Dart file, and in this case the file name will be result. So let's define the result skin. So our result screen is done. So when we will create or instantiate a result screen from our main screen, we will pass the model instance, and from here in the build method we are basically using the first name, last name, email and password from the model field to show in the screen. So our result page is done, and now come in the main.dart and import these two other files. So import model.dart and also import result.dart. So let's define more functionality in this form. Okay, so at first what I want to do, I want to validate the forms data. Suppose if there is no first name is provided, when I want to click this sign up, I want to see that if all the fields are provided. That's why I want to use a validator function. So to do that, I can use the my text field, and here after the first name I want to use the validator property. Here if you check this my text from field, you will see that I can pass a validator function, right, which is stored in the instance of my text from field, and which will be basically used when we create this text from field. We are basically using that validator function. If there is no validator function is provided, nothing will be used in here. So we want to pass that validator function is in here. So in this validator function, in the parameter you can access the value. So that means if you want to access the value in this function parameter, you can access that using string and any reference name. So in this case we are using this value. So let's define this function, and this function, basically this anonymous function, is passed as a reference in this validator property. So that validator property used to validate this text field. So in this validator function, let's write some code. So basically in this code, what we are checking, that if the value is empty, then we want to show user that enter your first name. So currently the value is empty, right? But if I click sign up, nothing is happened because I also need to define this sign up on pressed method. If I want to validate this form fields, what I have to do, let's remove this print sign up for this moment. I want to access this form, right? So when you are creating a form, you remember we created a global key, so that is form key, which is passed as a key in this form. So using this key we can access the form. So to do that, let's define if form key in the if logic dot current state. All of these fields are under or descendants of this form widget, right? Descendant of this from widget. So that if when I want to access the current state of this form, so when Flutter develop this form, it will automatically develop a form state, And you remember that when we created this from key, we defined that the state of that key will be a from state. So we can access the current state of this from using this key, from key dot current state. So if any text field is filled or not filled, we can access that. So we want to access the state by using from key dot current state. And now we want to call the validate method. So validate method means when you will call that from key dot current state dot validate, it will call all the validator method defined in the fields. So in our case, the text from field. So here we define a validator function, right? So this validator function will be called when we will call from key dot current state dot validate. So now let's save this thing and run, and after that click sign up, and you see it is showing, if I click sign up, it is showing enter your first name, because when this current state dot validate function method is called, this validator method in the first name text field is called, and here it found that there is nothing is provided. That means the value is empty. That's why it is showing return enter your first name, and it is showing in the bottom. So if I type something like my first name Mahmoud and click sign up again, you will see that validation error is gone. One thing you have to remember, if there is any validation error, you must return and show a information that what is the error, and if everything is okay, you must have to return null. And every validator function, if provided, is returning null, that means all the validation is okay, then this if condition will fulfill, and then you can use the save the data. But right now we did not define that method, we only want to define the validator method. So now let's define the validator method for other text from fields. I just want to copy this validator property and method and want to use in the second case, where I want to just change the first to last. Okay, so now if I remove this thing, suppose for example sign up, you see now it is showing two validator field, the enter your first name, enter your last name. In case I provide the first name and click sign up, so the first one is gone, and if I want to fulfill the second field, you will see the second validation will also be gone. So now let's define the validation field for validator function for other text field as well. So I just copy this validator property with the function and paste it in the email for the email text field. So here what we want to do, we want to check that if the text field is a email or not, right? So to do that, I want to use if not validator. So here validator means that we install this library, right? Validator, we give an alias that validator, so we can access the validator dot is email method, is email, where we want to pass this value. So that means if this field does not contain any email, then I want to show user in validation error, please enter a valid email. Okay, otherwise put null. So now after saving this, if suppose I give something not an email and click sign up, you will see there is an error is showing, please enter a valid email. But if I want to give a proper email, Mahmoud at suppose test.com, and click sign up, you will see that validation error is gone. So this is the validation is email, and now give the password. Okay, so I again copy this validator, or I can just redefine the validator myself. So here I want to use string value, and in the password field what we want that password field should be minimum 7. So if user give a password, the length of the password should be 7. So I want to check if value dot length less than 7, return. If this validation error does not happen, what I want to do, I want to use another method from key to access the form, and then I want to use current state dot save method. So now you are seeing this new method, that from key dot current state to access the current state of the form dot save method. So when you are using this dot save method, you basically have to give another property in the within the text from field. So here that property will be the onSaved. So here I can also access the value, string value. So what basically this onSaved method is doing, right? So when we call this from key dot current state dot save, which we will also be used in this here also. So when user will click this sign up and everything is okay, we will also want to use this from key dot current state dot save method to be called in here, because when you will use this method, it will use the onSaved parameter. So here in the password field, we want to use this onSaved parameter, and we want to define a model instance here, model and no value. Okay, so here we in the test form we are created an instance of this model class, and here when in the password field, when everything is okay, I mean the password is above 7 characters, so we will call this from key dot current state dot save. So when you will call this method, then if you define onSaved property in your text field, that will be called. So here what we want to do, we want to use model dot password equals value. We want to assign this password thing in our model instance password, and here in the in the real text field, you will see that real text form field there is a onSaved property. So there is one validator property which will be called when you will call this current state dot validate, and if you will call from key dot current state dot save, so whatever data is filled in this form field will be called using the onSaved property. So if you define the onSaved property, that will be called when you will call current state dot save. Okay, so here we want when we use this password field, we want to save this password in the model dot password, so that we can check that thing again in our confirm password. So let's define the confirm password validator. So that means at here when in the confirm password validator, I want to check that if the previous text field is filled or not, and if this value is equal to the previous value, that means the password value is equal or not. If both are true, okay, then what I want to do, I want to use return password not match, simple. So if this value does not match with this previous value, I want to show the user a validation error that password not match. But if everything is okay, I will just return the null. And like this, I want to define the onSaved property in all the field, in the first field, first name field also. So here in the validator, let's define the onSaved string value, and here what I want to do, model dot first name equals value, and let's copy this onSaved property in the function and use that in the last name as well, and here you put the last name, and finally in the email also use this on validator and use the email, and in the password we basically use already in the onSaved, we already use the onSaved property in the password. You may ask me why we use onSaved property in the password field and not in the confirm password field. Basically, when you want to compare these two values, you first have to call this save method to save the state value, and then only then you can access that property in the next text field. That's why we basically call this from key dot current state dot save for this password field, and when we are checking the validation in the confirm password, we can access that value by the model dot password. Otherwise, if you do not call this from key dot current state dot save, this password whatever you type in here will not be saved in your model instance. Okay, so our onSaved property and our validator properties are defined. So let's run this program again, and let's remove all the fields, and now if I click sign up, it is showing that there is a yellow box is showing. Basically this is shown when there is a, in production it will not be shown, but in the debug mode it is showing because this text field takes some space, that's why it is showing. so it's not a big issue. If I suppose remove this keyboard from keyboard and toggle software keyboard, you will see that the yellow box will be gone. So anyway, that's not a big issue. So here suppose I type Mahmoud and I click sign up again, you will see this validation error gone. So here I want to type Asan, and if I click, this validation error gone. So here I want to give a real email address, suppose test.com, this validation got, and here I want to pass some 1 2 3 4 5, and if I click, that error gone. And if I define different thing not match with this thing, and if I click, it will say that password not match. So I have to give the exact password abc 1 2 3 4 5. If I click sign up, then there is no validation error. But at this moment, what I want to do, that if there is no validation error, then we want to see the show the result screen. So here in the after from key dot current state dot save, when I call this method, all the fields value are saved in the model dot instance, right? And here what I want to do, I want to use the navigator object, navigator dot push method to pass the second screen. So here in the route parameter, what I have to give, I have to use a material page route widget, and here in the builder method I have to define a function. So the function will take the context as the parameter, and I want to use the arrow function, and here I want to define the second screen in the result, and I want to pass the model as a reference, which I created as an instance in here. And let's save this thing. And now, so after, if I click sign up, you will see our second screen, that is the result screen, is shown in here, and I can see all the data, Mahmoud Hasan, Mahmoud at test.com, and abc 1 2 3 4 5. You have to remember that when you want to create a form, you have to create a global key, and you have to pass that as a key in the form widget. So using that key you can access the form, and when a form is created, by default Flutter will create a form state, and you can access that state using the global key, so form key. And when you want to access the current state of the form, so all fields are descendants of that form. So when you want to access any of that fields, you can use the form key dot current state. So when you use this getter function, you can access the current state, and when you will click dot validate method, all the validators you define will be called. So if any validator will return other than null, you will see that this sign up will not work. So if I just remove this awesome thing and click sign up, you will see it is showing the validation error. But after I fill the field with a real text, you will see only then the validation is returns true, and you can save the data, and you can do whatever you want to use using that data. Okay, so I hope you understand how to create a form in Flutter application. And also this code is in my GitHub. So in the code in the video description, you can see the link for the code. So thank you for watching, and keep learning.